And today's our guest is Andy McMullen from Legacy Acquisitions. Welcome, Andy. How are you doing?
Yeah, great to see you, Rama. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. And a little bit about Andy. Andy is a managing partner at Legacy Acquisitions, which is focused on partnering with world-class operators while delivering white glove services to its investors. Andy values his long-standing personal relationships with brokers, operators, institutional lenders, private equity firms, and has orchestrated over 1 billion in commercial real estate transactions over a 20-year career. So with that, Andy, how exactly you started your career in real estate space?
Yeah, so I started off out of school. I started off kind of like a friend had an internship, and he was like a boutique firm. So he would say, "Hey, look, we've got some projects that we're building, some projects that we're developing, some are managed industrial, some are office buildings. Maybe you could kind of come in on the sales side." At the time, I was graduating school in Los Angeles, and there's some consulting jobs available. There were some sales jobs available. It seemed like all the good jobs were across the country. I wanted to stay in LA. So I came by, I tried it. And, I hadn't really thought that much from honestly about real estate in general. I mean, I had kind of followed a little bit about, what happened in the residential, but my family was my mom was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, basketball coach. We didn't talk about much of the kind of business side at the table. And so it was almost immediate, it was almost instant that I got intrigued by the not just the complexity, but the kind of spot for anybody to get into this world, right? I remember dealing with people that were brilliant. I remember people that I thought were maybe a little dim at, but there was always these kind of traits that you would see with either entrepreneurs or people that were in real estate that kind of transcended what you were told about a business as you're growing up, right? My kids go by, this poster every day that we put up like 10 things that take actually zero talent, right? Zero talent. There's lists and I won't name all of them, but they include like being on time and bringing the energy, right? And being coachable, right? I mean, these are things that everybody can do. And when you think about all these kind of simple things, if anybody can do that, they become extraordinary, right? You think about the people that have succeeded in this business, those ones that do these very zero talent things and are consistent with it are extraordinary. So that's kind of what gravitated me to this space because I knew I didn't have to do just sales or just investment or just property management. There was something for me to kind of build out on. So that's kind of how I got started, more so on the broker side. And then from there, kind of gravitated towards more development.
Such a powerful stuff. You simplified it. Cool. Zero skills, but lot of powerful stuff. Bringing like lot of on time, energy, and all this stuff are like so much powerful to achieve great success. And in your bio, you meant I read it out. So you work with world class operators, right? So can you elaborate or define why you want to work with only world class operators? How do you
Yeah,
pick that?
gosh, man, this goes back so many times. So I've been in this game 25 years, as you know, Roman. So there's a lot of peaks and valleys, right? It's always kind of, two steps forward, one step back. But my experiences, because I was so eager to be an investor and I wanted to put all these deals together and I wanted to actually be able to say that I'm the sponsor or I'm the lead, or I want to invest in this project. And let's just say I started off in probably early 2000s investing in some syndications. It wasn't really called that at the time. I mean, it was, but it wasn't really well known. And I remember some of the people that I would bring on, they would have, I'd be kind of just fascinated with the experience that they had, or that they said the right things, or they communicated the right way. And then I remember getting into the deal and the things that should have been low hanging fruit, like investor reporting or communication or integrity, they were all kind of, they took a back seat, right? And so at some point after kind of either, becoming so frustrated with the service that I was getting or the partnerships that I was getting into, and I've got, if we want to dig deeper, plenty of those examples, I started to think, what makes like a world class operator? And to me, that's a world-class team, right? If there's anybody that you're investing with, which is one person, if they're investing in just me, just Andy, that's probably a mistake, right? Because Andy is going to have to manage the operation, and he's going to have his people that are on the operations. You have to have some great people that are doing the sales and getting the reporting out and the accounting and legal and all that stuff. If you're focusing on one person, it's not going to work. As you know, you have your team. So the world-class operator came from, hey, I need to vet much better. And I need to understand what are those red flags. And has that person run a business before? And if you were to take me from the beginning of that deal all the way to the end of the exit, what was the reporting? Give me everything. Show me the first email that you sent out to your investor. Show me the first monthly report that you sent out to your investor. Show me the quarterly. Show me when the setbacks that you actually communicated to your investor, right? In every report that we put out, there's a setbacks page because it's inevitable. So that's what I meant. So I will give out a couple of, shout outs. I mean, groups that we've worked with before that I think are just doing it fantastic, that we're just, we invest with world-class operator. I think DeRosa is a world-class operator. If anybody knows DeRosa Group, I'm sure you've had, Matt or Liz or
Yeah.
somebody on your show, Justin. I think they're just a world-class operator. And we've worked with, I think Lone Star is fantastic. We've dealt with them and Rob Beers and the way that they put their reporting together. There's a lot of groups out there that they didn't start off that way, but they started off with those things, which is I have one, integrity, and two, I'm going to do whatever it takes to communicate with my investors. That might take, I take some lumps, right? And I have to deal with some tough questions, but that there's a curiosity in making things better. So that's probably a long-winded answer for your question, but that's kind of what it means to me. It's kind of comes back to these simple things that are not easy to execute.
Thank you for sharing that. So, what other qualities you would look in operators, or when you're bringing partners, or lenders or brokers? What other qualities you would look, or you want to work
Yeah. So we've got a team about of 12. I'm talking about legacy, us as a sponsor, right? So
Yeah,
we manage and operate multifamily projects and built to rent projects.
yeah,
And so we're managing the construction process, we're managing the property management part, we're managing kind of the sales. So my job, honestly, is really what I think is kind of the propulsion czar and the talent accumulator, right? So I want to bring in people that are much smarter, and I don't even mean this in like a deprecation way. There's no false humility here. I'm actually saying that I want people that are brighter than me, and that wasn't always the case, right? That we all have egos, we all deal with this, right? This is the way that God made us, but I want to have a team that not just of specialists, but of smart generalists too. It's mix. Our team has a mix of kind of engineering background, mix of sales background, mix of art. I mean, we've kind of taken that Google approach where they'll bring in just a bunch of different talent in order to kind of have their organization have different perspectives. And one thing that I think that I should hit on, Rama, is if there's somebody listening right now and they're kind of in the early stages of discovering real estate, but they know that they've got this skill set that is special. Don't sit out and wait for you to learn how all of these things work and read hundreds of books, and all that's going to be important. You have plenty of time to educate yourself. That's really, really important. But to me, if I'm going to take the guy who is going to step in and try and learn and bring his skill set to our team, that to me is much more valuable because I can bring the 25 years of experience and other guys can bring that, but I can't bring Rama's electrical engineering background. And I can't bring the kind of perspective of somebody. We've got teams that worked at Meta or Amazon. They're just like a different way of approaching the marketing piece and the traction, right? And the KPIs and all of those things that make us better. So all of those, it's tough to kind of, it's all of those things, honestly, but it definitely does come down to how clearly can you communicate a vision to your people and how consistent can you be in having those one-on-ones and message with your executive team and monitoring those KPIs and things that are helping you push forward. So I don't know if that's helpful or not for
yeah,
folks.
absolutely. So you touched a very, very important point you want to discuss. I share your vision to your one-on-one with your team. So how exactly you plan your vision, your company's vision, legacy acquisition vision, like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or
Yeah,
10 years? How
yeah.
exactly plan that? How exactly you implement that plan? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all kind of starts from, and this is almost in everything that we do in partnership with other folks, is that we want to bless communities in through real estate. So that just means not just the community of the residents that are there, not just the community of our team that is working on it, not just the community of the partners, right? But everyone that we deal with, we want to have elite service. The first is our faith, family, elite service. We want our group to consider pursuit of excellence, right? And extreme ownership with that integrity, extreme ownership. And that's not easy. That's something that you consistently have to discuss and challenge and defend, right? Because you're kind of putting together, for those that are out there that aren't familiar with maybe traction or the VTO, your kind of vision traction, is that you want to have kind of the starting point, which for us is kind of transforming these lives through community building. And then everything else kind of trickles down from there. When you're getting in these meetings and you're having people that maybe they're focused on one thing that they're doing pretty well, but the vision that we have is these three things, right? And I'm more responsible than most people on the shiny objects. And I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur in that regard, right? I have a hard time staying focused on exactly what, so I need people around me to keep me focused on that one thing. But if everything kind of comes back to those values, then you asked, we can basically from there produce our 1 year, right? Based on 1 year on revenue, 1 year on growth, how many communities that we want to build, where do we want to be in what we call the kind of community service part of what we're building. So what's really important to us, Rama, is that we have communities where we have teams. I don't know if you're familiar with apartment life, but people like that are doing, you know, community events, for us, Bible study, they're doing, barbecues, things that kind of bring a community together, right? So that's kind of really important for us. And then from the 5 year, the 3 and 5 year, you kind of bring your KPIs. So we'll do like I'm sure you've had people talk about this, and but we'll have our kind of rocks. And what that basically means for anybody that's interested is that you've got these kind of 3 to 5 things that as a team you basically definitely want to achieve, and then all of the kind of personal to-dos throughout the week are monitored through our project management, which is monday.com. So we could go much granular on that. I love to geek out on it. Sometimes it's boring for folks, but that's kind of how it's got to start with these kind of executive meetings where we're building out the VTO, and then everybody has a say in how we're progressing forward. And you always get feedback again. Sometimes the things that I think that are important, everybody's like, why are we doing it that way? Right? They came from electrical engineering, right? And they're like, hey, that's just a sales way of looking at it. We've got to look at it more for process.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So how is your day look like and how exactly you manage, your day?
I don't know if you're familiar with the miracle morning, and
Yeah.
because of so many people talk about it, it almost sounds trite, but I definitely want to say that this works. And the part that works for me, not all of it works for me, but the part that works for me is that kind of sitting in silence. And anybody who's ever struggled with consistent failures or has woken up, with these kind of anxious thoughts, like I'm just afraid of what today will bring, right? And we've all had those seasons in our life, right? And for me, that happened for, on and off for years, right? Where you'd have some of these triumphs and then they become failures. And then sometimes your failures would lead to more failures, right? And so for me, it was kind of trying to be very intentional and consistent about my, what we considered affirmations for me is reading my Bible every day and reading in general. I have a very kind of regimented workout program. But the thing that's helped me is I can't really do the meditation very well. So I'm trying, but I just have never been able to sit still long enough. But for me, my kind of meditation is writing, where I really try to focus in. And anybody who read The Artist's Way, I recommend it. But the idea that you're writing morning pages and you're kind of getting all of the chaff that's in your brain, that's rolling around, all your anxieties. Oh my gosh, I know Rama's not going to like me on the pod. I'm going to say something that's going to be tweeted out, whatever that is. All of these kinds of anxious thoughts, you just keep writing, just stream of consciousness. And by the time that you're done with that writing, what happens is this kind of clarity as to what those three things that you really want to achieve in the day. And then I end with three things that I'm grateful for. And it could be as simple as I'm just grateful for the neighbor who I'm able to have these conversations with. I'm grateful. It could be simple things like for me, I love playing chess or golf or whatever that is. It could be simple things, but it's hard to start your day with that same kind of anxiety that I used to start my days with sometimes. And so that would be my morning routine. And then I think that something that might be helpful for folks that are running a business is try to have most of your team meetings at the front end of the week. Monday is a little bit tricky for us on because I think that you don't get as much, people got to kind of get primed a little bit into the week. So I would say the Tuesdays for me, we kind of have back-to-back meetings, and that would be with my executive team, with the kind of marketing team, with kind of our operations call, and then I'm in part of a couple of networks, C12 organizations that kind of help, other business owners really look at how you're running your business. So I spend a lot of that time on the phone, honestly, and then kind of through Monday.com, I can kind of go through exactly where are we on this particular thing? How do we move this forward? As opposed to me like, I know Tony said he was going to be doing this, but I can't remember if if he got the information, and all of it's just right in front of me. So I don't know. I would love to talk to you. Maybe it's like an ask Rama about process, because I know that you really focus a lot on process. But to me, the consistency part of it, as lame as it might sound, and as hundreds of times that people have said it, on a podcast before, to me, that's the most important part.
Thank you for sharing that. And so what exactly you guys are focusing right now? Can you elaborate on that?
I mentioned that a kind of couple of holes that we dug ourselves in. Again, I've been in this business for a long time. So we were investing in some markets where we didn't have the right team. So Dallas in 2006 to 2012, we probably didn't have the right team. I think for anybody that's kind of new to real estate and figuring out, hey, why am I in this business? Think about cash flow, appreciation. A lot of people don't think about, honestly, is the depreciation part and then the loan pay down. So even if you're in a project that could be doing much better, if you've got your taxes are much less, and people are in a W-2 and they may be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, just think about, hey, imagine if I just didn't have to pay half of the taxes. I'm in California, I'm in San Diego. If I didn't have to pay half of my taxes to California, the depreciation part is big. But the other part is the loan pay down. So if you're getting a loan, and as you're operating this property, more and more of your principal is getting paid back, and you have more and more equity. So some people that don't hang on enough don't benefit from those things. But one thing that we kind of tried to do was, the market stopped in 2008, right? Just the music stopped for everybody. I've been through a couple cycles, 2000, 2001, 9/11. In 2008, it's just stopped for everybody. It's much different than it is now. But in that time period from like 2008 to 2012, we were just kind of picking off smaller multifamily projects, and we would be able to finance them in any possible way that we could. And that probably took us to about 2016, 17. And I would be in partnerships with folks that were kind of curious about this built to rent. It was less about built to rent, and it was more about single family in large packages, right? So if you remember those like same folks in 2008 that may have been responsible for part of our collapse, right? Or my water being shut off on some development projects that we were working on the time, were the same ones that were buying up for 50 cents on the dollar where I was in Los Angeles and Venice Beach and El Segundo and a lot of areas in around Inglewood, which is much different then. And they'd be buying all these homes for 50 cents on the dollar, and then they'd manage them, right? But it wasn't efficient because you had these scatter sites, everywhere. So you'd have to be having managers go across the country. Well, about 2016, you started to see, hey, developments come back. It's been 10 years where there's been no building. So this supply is so low now that it makes a much more efficient strategy to basically build these projects in 100 to 200 units and then manage them like horizontal multifamily, manage them like you would a horizontal, as opposed to these scatter sites. So that's kind of 2016, 17 is kind of when I started thinking about it. We partnered up with somebody who had been doing it on a small scale for 10 years, building 20 units, run out of money, or build 20 units, manage them, and then they'd start over again. And so now we're kind of focusing on doing much more of the built to rent. And I can get into a little bit deeper detail on that, but I'll let it breathe for your
Yeah,
question.
yeah. So yeah, definitely. So share me a little bit more about, what kind of approach BTR, why BTR, what markets, what is the reason behind selecting those markets?
I'm in California. We've developed in here. The neighborhood council is more difficult than the municipalities that we've got in the South. So our focus is on the South, Southeast. We like Louisiana, Alabama. We like the Carolinas, Texas to have some stuff still there. Some Winston-Salem. Those are some multifamily projects that we've got, some in Houston. But really, I'll give you the kind of our strategy. Find land that's relatively inexpensive in a market where the mayor and the municipalities want us there, has to have some growth, right? And there has to be some good elementary schools. A lot of the residents that we have happen to be younger families, maybe either couples or younger families with maybe a couple of toddlers. And that seems to be the dynamic, right? You're probably kind of in that end of the millennial class, I would say. So there's like a different view of owning things. It's not like the picket white fence. It's not like, when I grew up, the only asset my parents had ever was, whatever equity they had in their house, right? Now you could buy your business on a phone. You want new stuff, you want to live in new stuff, you want stuff for your dog. So as opposed to multifamily, we thought, hey, let's just build, dog parks, basketball courts, playgrounds in these areas where we know that we've got a certain growth opportunity and good schools surrounding it. So that was kind of the simple. Now become much harder to find. And then I would say where we lucked out, Rama, which I couldn't have predicted, was the built to sellers basically just pulled back. So what that meant for us is we were no longer competing with best in class labor. Prices started to normalize because there wasn't the supply demand. We're building stick build, so we're not dealing with kind of the concrete and energy part of the expenses. I mean, they've normalized a little bit. Insurance is a killer for everywhere, so that's something that we've had to adjust to. But what I don't think that we could have predicted was this kind of, I call it like this triangle built to rent, which is one, you had these rents in some of these southeastern markets, which were still ascending, going up. You had supply that was really low. I mean, we're 4 to 7 million, depending on how many units you consider, what source you consider as scarcity. And much of that is in the South. And then the other thing that which we could have never predicted was this affordability gap, right? That those people that would be buying something with their mortgage now is almost $1,100 delta between what they could rent. And that $1,100 delta is for maybe older homes that you're having to fix up. Now you can just get in a nice home with all the tech package, turn on your AC from your car, you've got the storage, you got the dog park, you got the backyard. And then the other thing that in addition that I couldn't have thought of was that we're getting a lot more of the, I would say, empty nesters, right? They're not ready to go to senior living yet. They love the idea of having their barbecue in their backyard and their pets, but they don't want to do anything except turn on a light bulb. They want to cut the grass. So those have been kind of what our focus is on. So if we can kind of build out those communities, and we've got 3 projects we're in various stages now, and then we asset manage other ones that we already own. That's kind of where we feel like we can create the most value for our investors and for the communities that are there.
Absolutely. Thank you. So how current markets like high interest rates, or inflation impacting your, BTR or any other, acquisitions?
So this is interesting. And some people are going to think, oh, come on, this is just a sales job. But I had this conversation with our lender a couple of times, one of the largest debt funds in the country, kind of controlled by Wall Street. But what they're saying is like, there's not a better time in this next 2 years if you're a developer that's building stick build, right? Because you can get a rate cap, right? But you're building through this interest rate lag. We own multifamily projects. We've had rate caps that have expired. Obviously, you've got a totally different animal there. But if you think about, because the interest rates are higher, that's keeping out a lot of the built to sellers, right? Because they can sell their projects with their own interest rates if they want to, but they're going to have to buy a pool, and there's going to be an expense. And if you're building concrete, etc., you're dealing with a lot of energy prices, you're dealing with a lot of power prices, you're dealing with, so concrete's gone up quite a bit. But if you're a stick builder building homes, single family, and we build from 100 to 300 at a time, you now have best in labor, right? So that's reduced the cost there. And we're not competing with all the kind of supply demand issues that we would if we were competing on resources, right? Because the builder sellers are out. So what we really focus when almost every conversation we have our time is speed, like the speed with which we can move these projects forward, right? And that's from what we typically do. Rama, we'll buy the raw land, we'll put our own money in it, we'll buy the raw land, we'll get it entitled with our own money. I should say we mostly option the raw land before we buy it. So we'll option the land, put our own money in it, entitled, get it approved by the city, and then we'll go ahead and we'll buy the land with our own money, finish the engineering environmental with our own money. So we've stripped away a lot of the risk that people think about with development, which is, you want me to give you some money for, and then maybe the mayor decides that he's waiting for the next election, or there's one, crotchety old guy that says, I don't want it near me, whatever that is. So we try to strip away that risk, and then we'll start at the horizontal. So from the horizontal phase, which is streets, roads, utilities, from that phase through the vertical with the actual unit build, the speed with which we can get this done is critical for us, right? Because we can make more and more money for those investors if we speed through the process. So the efficiencies, the process that you always talk about, that's huge for what we're trying to do on the build to rent side. And that's why we need best in class people working with us.
Yeah, awesome. Good luck with that. Would you share any best experiences so far? Anything?
I'll tell you something, that's, if you're a real estate investor and you buy something that has like a broken down playground, and it has, you've got these breezeways that you can't see, and there's no lights, and there's a community of people that are kind of going in and out of fences, and you put in intentional processes that turns that around, and you visit that property a year later and you see kids on the playground, and you see the pool is no longer a pond, and those people don't know who you are, but you walk through and they know the other people that are there. For me, I'm a deacon at a church. I love the idea of community. I think that's what God wants for us. But when you see that part of it, and you see kind of your role in actually creating a community that people can enjoy from where it was before, it's hard not to get a little bit taken by it, right? I mean, yes, we do this for money. Yes, we do this for our personal freedom. Yes, we do this for our family. That's the reason that real estate makes sense, and it's the reason that attracts all the best people, right? The electrical engineers, the smartest people in the world that are doctors and lawyers, they all want to have more freedom. The people that have golden handcuffs, they want to have more freedom. That's why real estate makes sense for them. So for me, that in a long way is what keeps you going.
Yeah, awesome. And would you also share any challenging experience?
Oh gosh, man. Like I've got so many. I would say kind of when I felt like at depths, when I'm referring to like times when it's hard to get up and like keep going. So we owned a property in Dallas, and it was a basically one of my first syndications early on, maybe 2006, 7, struggling through it. It was kind of a mixed use property. And I was definitely a lot more arrogant, definitely a lot more short tempered, definitely a lot less willing to partner with people that could help me. But we ran into this problem where one of our partners killed himself. And about 2 weeks later, it was a friend, it was a long-term friend. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the, I'll leave the name out of it, but let's just say from our attorney, said, hey, you're being sued for, you know, the total amount of your property. Your partner had put that into a trust. He was an RIA. And so for about 2 years, myself and another partner were embroiled in defending ourselves for something that it was obvious that he'd kind of created his own accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I learned from that, one, is that most people who are in a partnership will never go back to another partnership, right? And this is different than, hey, I just met this guy at a network. I've known him for years, right? But it's the human condition. He owned $1 billion IRA, and he had bought a lot of the Merrill Lynch brokers as the 2008, 2009, a lot of them started to kind of come out of Bank of America. And he started to feel the news tightening a little bit on what his business was. And so he started making these deals with other foundations, et cetera. And we were the kind of collateral damage. And so the lesson of that is not to have partners, right? The lesson is not to give up on vetting people. The lesson in that is that there's always a way. And so those investors that we had, we figured out another way to take care of them. We got them in another deal. We were able to pay them off with our own money. There's always a way. And so in order for you to grow, you do need to have partners and you do need to vet them, but you also need to understand that we live in a terrestrial world where we don't have control over all of the human condition elements that sometimes weigh on people, right?
Yeah.
So we just do the best that we can. I've got another hundreds of stories about that. You can bring me on another time, but I just want to impress that upon people that there is a way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful. Thank you. So, would you share any breakthrough moment?
Yeah, I would say that the breakthrough moment for me was trusting myself. And that sounds simple, and Coach Wooden talks about be true to yourself. But what does that mean, really? If you think about it, it means only you know whether you're doing the best that you can. And what I used to do when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s, even, is that I would defer to that smarter guy, or I would defer to that more experienced guy. And what they didn't have was all the kind of synthesized information that I did by all the nuanced, information that I had collected. And so listening to some of those advice is important, but at some point you're going to have to make a decision and it might contradict what your senior advisor is telling you. So I think some people get stuck. And I know that there's people out there that are like, oh yeah, I've got this coach and he's telling me to do this, but I know that he doesn't understand this part of it. And so I want to impress upon people, if you're running a business or you're an investor, is they don't know, right? And that just means that they don't know your background, they don't know your experiences, they don't know the conversations that you've had about these things. So you have to trust your instincts on some of these things. So that's kind of the breakthrough moment that I had probably in my 30s. And it did take a couple of mentors, ironically, to help me see that.
Such a powerful stuff, trust your own intuition or own strengths. Awesome. Any books that impacted your life?
I read this one a lot. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So everybody who's in this real estate game knows that or they should know. This is not about just investing. You're in a business and you're in a business of leading people to help you invest in real estate. You're in a business of building these communities and managing these communities. And these are homes for people. And so The Hard Thing About Hard Things, Ben Horowitz, is just a fantastic book about, hey, this is not what to do. I've already broken my business. I have a business. How do I fix it? And so The Hard Thing About Hard Things is a great book. I mean, there's a number of great books that I've read on real estate and mindset. The Stephen Schwarzman book is a great book about just Blackstone. I'm trying to think of what else that I've read. In the summertime, Rama, I always try to mix in a couple of fiction books, only because I think that there's a lot of truth in fiction, right? And so I revisited Pillars of the Earth, which is a Follett book. So anyways, I spend a lot of time reading You talk about breakthroughs. The breakthrough for me was the Kindle. I was like, oh, I'm going to hold on to a book. But then I was like, yeah, but then I've got to look up that word and look up that phrase. Now I got it all on my Kindle and I could read 4 books if I'm not in the mood for this one. So that's a breakthrough. But I would definitely check out The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I don't hear it mentioned enough.
Yeah. And how can listeners can connect with you, Andy?
Yeah, so we've got some really cool resources on our website, legacyacquisitions.com. If people are interested in our information about build to rent, if they're interested in kind of habit trackers, all that stuff is there. LinkedIn, I'm active on LinkedIn. And, if I could just share with the audience, there's people out there that are a little bit reluctant to reach out to folks that have been doing this for a while. And I can just assure you that well, not almost every person that has gotten to some level of success had some help along the way. I just want to encourage you to reach out, whether it's me or my team. Reach out to us. We'll see if we can't point you in the right direction with some help or resources or referrals like Rama.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you for adding value to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I love being on here. I'm glad I was able to get on. Thank you. It's an honor.
Sure.